Shana Tova, happy, healthy, sweet New Year to you and to all of your families. It's good to see so many faces that weren't here for so long. I have a very embarrassing confession to make. Almost 3 years ago, on this very date in the Hebrew calendar, I was in the sanctuary right over there. It was Rosh Hashana, and we got to that part of the service where I take my talit and I place it over my head. And it's normally a time where I use my own petitions and my own prayers. I don't pray from the book. And I have the talis over my head, and I'm making my own prayer, and my prayer was something along these lines. I was feeling so unusually hurried in life. Evie was leaping towards the end of high school. Elias's bar mitzvah was on the horizon. My mother was not getting any younger. Dory and I could barely find time for a date night or just go for a walk. We have these two adorable dogs, and I had no time to play with them or just sit on the couch and rub their bellies, and I was really frustrated because I couldn't catch my breath. Every day someone was calling. Someone was sick, someone was dying, someone was getting married, someone was having a bar mitzvah. Rabbi, let's take a trip to Portugal. Rabbi, let's go to Jewish India. Rabbi, let's go here. And I couldn't catch my breath. I was exhausted. So I put the talis over my head and I said, God, please make it all come to a screeching halt. All the travel, all the work, just make it stop. I need to keep getting paid, God, but I just need a place where I can dial into those needs and not be physically present. I want it all to just slow down. And then lo and behold, everything I asked for happened. Before I knew it, I was sitting on my patio, holding Dory's hand, sipping a glass of wine, with our pooches in our laps. I had meals with the kids, and we played game night every single night for months. I didn't go to an airport for 8 months. I was doing chores around the house, and it was all of this time and exactly what I asked for. And you know what? I was totally unsatisfied. Now, first of all, I would never make a request for my own benefit that would harm any soul or cause the death of any person, yet alone millions. But what I noticed is that as soon as my wish was fulfilled, I didn't want it. I was so focused on my next wish that I didn't focus on the gift that was granted. Within a few days of realizing that COVID was more than a snow day, I found myself with my talis over my head again, this time in my living room. And I was praying to God, and I said, God, make it all go back to the way it was. I want to see my family on Pesach. I want to prepare for Elias's bar mitzvah here and in Israel. I want the kids to have the social experience of going to school and all the excitement that goes with it. God, I love my wife, but I want us to be able to go in our different lives and do what we need to do. I want to be back in people's world as they're experiencing all of the markers that is available to them in this journey called life. And I realized as I took the talis off of my head that all I've ever wanted isn't enough. And at the same time, almost everything that I've ever wanted is right with me while I'm busy looking for it. Why do we always think that our biggest and best blessings are just around the corner? You know, Fleetwood Mac is right. We can't stop thinking about tomorrow. But sometimes we just need to think about today and the gifts that we have today that are in our pockets, that are under our feet, and that are surrounding us, that all of us are guilty of missing and not appreciating. Rabbi Harold Kushner tells a fantastic story of a hurried businessman and his congregation. And one day, Rabbi Kushner says to this executive, Bob, why are you always on the run? Why are you always moving so fast? And Bob says to Rabbi Kushner, I'm moving so fast because I'm chasing success and fulfillment and hard work. No one gets rich on 9 to 5, Rabbi Kushner. And I have to tell you that as a fast-paced and frenetic person myself, who's often on the move and often in a hurry, Bob's answer resonated with me. But then Rabbi Kirshner had a fantastic response to Bob that caused me to pause. He said, Bob, that's a great answer if you're working under the assumption that all of those blessings are somewhere ahead of you and are eluding you. And maybe if you keep running and run fast enough, you can catch a few of them. But isn't it possible that those blessings are behind you or even right under your nose? And worse than that, if they are, that means the more you run and the faster you go, you become further away from those blessings. Kirshner's response to Bob is genius, and it is prophetic. It's like we're so busy running to order happiness online that we're not even home to receive the delivery. You know, usually during this holiday season, I turn to people in our community and the world and colleagues and friends, and I say to them, what do you want to hear from your rabbi these holidays? What do you hope that they'll talk about? And without exception, every single person said something along the lines of, well, Rabbi, the world is so broken and off kilter, like I've never seen before. I'm not sure what you can say. And it's true. There is so much that is scary in our world. There are wars and school shootings and the loss of civil discourse on a global level. And all of that and much more is reason to be scared. And on a personal level, there are people who are struggling with heightened anxiety, with total exhaustion, with kids who aren't socially connecting in schools. There are people who are dealing with financial instability. There are people who have workplace dissatisfaction. And there are people who are suffering through the disappointment of family members. We have a lot on our collective minds. In our world, we have people who are looking for a new spouse to bring them love, a new home to bring them peace, a faster car to get them places faster, a sexier vacation to have more opportunity to rest, an easier job to work a little less, a more prestigious job to be a little bit more revered. All of you can fill in the variables of these seeming voids in our lives. And when you take these feelings of wanting more and you mix it with social media and a wiring of negativity, you get a toxic brew that makes us all feel like the sky is falling. But is the sky really falling? While indeed so many of these things are worrisome, could it just be that they are a passing cloud that blocks the sun? That they're just a shower to give us the necessary rain that will eventually allow our flowers to bloom? I am not naive, and I don't like to think of myself as Pollyannish to the dangers that lurk around the corner. But I believe that there are thousands of blessings around each of us that are under our nose if we can just look up for a moment to see them. What is it that causes us to make these dreams that we begin to chase even though we have so much that we already need with us? What causes fear and panic and worry? And what makes all of us point out that which is broken and that which we're missing or that which is empty? Is it society or is it human nature? I would posit that we are in a never-ending quest for more because so many people in our world feel a sense of dissatisfaction. And when we're dissatisfied and we focus on that which we don't have, it feeds that dissatisfaction. And when we feed that dissatisfaction, we turn away from achievements and success and accomplishment. Any student that has scored an 85 on a test, who focuses on the 15% they got wrong, and the teacher points out the 15% they got wrong, and the parent points out the 15% they got wrong, doesn't realize that 85% is what they got right. I have been wrestling with this pursuit and how this pursuit of wanting more and focusing on that which we're missing seems to harm us. And it's not a new phenomenon. In fact, it's appropriate to say today on the birthday of the world, that this first occurred with Eve, the second person to inhabit the world, and the first woman to inhabit the world. Eve has everything at her disposal in the Garden of Eden. She has a partner, she's going to have children, she has an incredible life. There's only one thing she cannot have. She is told specifically, you cannot eat from the tree of knowledge. And what does Eve do? Eve does not go after plums or kumquats or grapefruits or oranges. Eve does not say, look at all that's at my disposal. She is tempted by the one thing that she can't have, and she eats it, and she's banished from the Garden of Eden. And we all know how that story continues. What if Eve were able to have said, you know, I have access to every fruit possible, except for one. I have access to every vegetable. I have a great partner. I have a great life. Life is really good. I'm okay without that one fruit. We might all still be in the Garden of Eden today. And if you move past the time of the Bible and you move to leaders of any decade, they also thought the sky was falling every day too. That tomorrow will bring the worst things possible. In the 30s, people worried about the Great Depression, thinking it could get no worse. In the 40s, it was World War II. The 60s, Vietnam War and the protest movement. In the 70s, it was the Iran hostages and the oil crisis. Everyone thought that tomorrow was doomsday, and it would be darker than it is today. And the problem is that when you have that global disposition of gloominess, it bleeds into our personal lives. No one sees climate change, and no one hears about a school shooting in Uvalde, and no one considers a nuclear Iran and translates that into blessings in their personal world. Now, most social scientists explain that the premonition of the worst is yet to come is patently false. Or as one social scientist coined it in the title of his book, the good news is, the bad news is wrong. We are a freer, happier, healthier, wiser, richer, and stronger people than ever before. We have progressed more than we ever dreamt or imaginable. From voting rights to minority inclusion to advances in science and healthcare, and we have prolonged life in ways that generations before us could only have dreamt about. And in this synagogue, we are all better, wiser, and stronger than we were when we last met in person. What's important to remember, the Stone Age didn't end because of the lack of stones. We all progressed, and we grew for the better. Steven Pinker, who is a well-known social scientist and author, he says we get caught up in two behaviors that feeds this vicious cycle. One, we dread losses more than we enjoy gains, and we dwell on setbacks more than we savor good fortune. And the second thing we do is we overestimate the frequency of probability of things that are terrible and the likelihood that they're coming right to us tomorrow. How many people have written me or called me concerned that there's going to be a pogrom happening in Bergen County in the next weeks or month? Now, obviously, this doesn't mean that bad things don't happen. And it doesn't mean that there isn't reason to worry. Bad things have happened, and bad things will happen. But they're not the only thing that happens, and they are not the sole perspective that we should take. The greatest theologian of my time, Mr. Fred Rogers, had a mother who explained that in moments of tragedy and fear and sadness, she would say, look for the helpers. Look how many people are running towards the earthquake, the fire, the sadness, to bandage wounds, to wipe tears, and to nourish the hungry. What Fred Rogers' mother was saying is that sadness and grief, of course, exist, but it doesn't mean that that is the negativity that should dominate the narrative. When the war broke out in the Ukraine, a group of people from our synagogue, from the Kaplan JCC on the Palisades, and from Congregation Ahavat Torah in Inglewood banded together because we felt that we had to be, like Fred Rogers' mom said, we had to be the helpers to make a difference. And when we went to Poland and to the Ukraine, we saw some things there that still cause my eyes to sting when I think about it. But at the very same time, I saw in this room behind me in our social hall 33,000 pounds of supplies that were donated by people from all walks of life, some in our congregation and some who just heard about us. I saw hundreds of volunteers come and pack bags and organize them by feminine products or toothpaste or socks or sleeping bags, and that we were able to bring with the help of airlines and others for those who were struggling as part of the refugee crisis. We witnessed when we were in the Ukraine, religious people of every stripe who set up kiosks and shops to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and give toys to kids. In our synagogue, when we got home from the Ukraine on the eve of Passover, we raised more than $60,000 to offer Passover seders and meals to Ukrainians who were commemorating the holiday in Krakow or in Warsaw, which is the very essence of what the holiday of Passover is all about. Some went to Poland and Ukraine and they saw curses, and I saw pain. But I also saw blessings. I saw loads of them. And I saw a world that we often pray for coming to realization. Not the war part, but the part of support and blessings. Now, I'm not naive to reality, and I know most of you aren't either. But I also fight that urge to be overcome by negativity, as if to say that there's no good or there's no growth or no opportunity and no blessings. And I work hard to see them and to recognize them when I can from that lesson I learned 3 years ago. For my entire life, since I can remember, I have been told and taught about the ongoing conflict between Palestinians and Israelis. It is a mainstay of the Middle East dialogue. We are reminded of terror and violence and separation walls and inequality and necessary checkpoints and division. But is that the only reality of the Palestinian-Israeli narrative? Dory and the kids and I spend time in Israel every summer. And this summer, we happen to have been there during the Food Truck Festival. And it is exactly what you think it is. It is a festival that is held in an open field in Jerusalem, in the valley outside of the Old City, where about 15 different food trucks that all sell different types of food set up. And on Wednesday and Thursday and Saturday nights, people go there and they buy different foods and they play music and they dance, and they're part of this absolute communal experience that is fun and it's quite delicious. I'm standing in line, and in front of me is a Muslim woman wearing the traditional hijab. And in front of her is an Orthodox Jew wearing a traditional velvet yarmulke. And the Orthodox Jew is getting ready to place his order, and like so many Jews, in front of a good food truck, he couldn't make up his mind. So he stood there and he hemmed and he hawed for a moment, and he turned behind him to the woman in the hijab, and he said to her in Hebrew, "I can't make up my mind. You go ahead of me." And the woman says, "Thank you," and she goes ahead and she places an order. And the Orthodox Jewish man says, "That sounds good. I'll have that too." And I was overcome. It was this simple, innocuous moment that happens hundreds upon hundreds of times. It happens in pharmacies. It happens in grocery stores. It happens on the highway. It happens in business. And all we do so often is focus on the conflict, when that little innocuous moment was really what happens the majority and plurality of the time in Israel, which is coexistence. Whether you're walking down Mamila Ball or you're going through the tunnels of the Old City, you see Muslims and Jews and Christians living and existing in peaceful harmony. Now, it doesn't mean that there isn't terror in Israel. It doesn't mean that there aren't challenges in Israel. But we focus on those moments of terror when there are so many more of those moments of coexistence and peace. In the Torah portion we read today and tomorrow, Sarah and Hagar have this feud because Sarah can't have a child and Hagar does. Then God visits Sarah. She has a baby. And what does she do? She banishes Hagar and Ishmael. And by banishing them, she creates a division that is still felt today between those who see Abraham as the father of Ishmael and Isaac, and the Islamic faith and the Jewish faith. What if she just said, you know, there are many blessings in a blended family? What if she just said, Hagar and Ishmael are part of my husband's fabric in life? Or they offer us something that we don't see or don't have. But instead, she wanted more, and as a result, created serious division. Abraham wasn't satisfied with how close his relationship was with God, so he decides to sacrifice his son Isaac. And while he doesn't kill Isaac, he kills all of his relationships afterwards. He has no relationship with Isaac, no relationship with Ishmael, and no relationship with his wife afterwards, because he had to take it to the next level to fill the void of that which was missing. In this room, we have people who've been struggling with their kids' emotional well-being. We have people who are grieving the loss of a parent. We have some who've lost their jobs and people who are dealing with depression and a sense of malaise and dissatisfaction. I have no magical elixir that can take away those problems. But I do suggest that we search for filling those voids and we take stock of what we do have and the blessings that do live in our personal orbits, the things that we too often take for granted or we ignore or we overlook before they're taken away from us. I know it sounds so incredibly trite on this new year, but it's so true. And sometimes we have to turn back to basics to get us back on track again. We know that we can't put a price on a happy life, and there's no quick recipe. But I would argue that much of the ingredients to a happier life right now live in our proverbial pantry. Some of us might need help with the recipe, but we probably don't even need to go shopping to get a little happier and less of that feeling of dissatisfaction. Have you bothered to take an inventory of what's in your cupboard that can bring you a sense of fulfillment and happiness and satisfaction? This Rosh Hashana, I want to ask you to consider doing two things. First, I'd like you all to consider beginning a gratitude journal. It's a short list of blessings and gifts and satisfaction and happiness that you're experiencing at any particular moment. Gratitude is what helps us see what it is that's with us instead of what is missing. If you keep this diary in a notepad that you keep in your pocket or in an app on your telephone, and then you look back on it in weeks and months the same way you look back nostalgically at pictures, it will give you an inventory of all the blessings and good things in your life that will begin to buoy your spirits. And next, but perhaps even more important, if those blessings include another living soul, I want you to carve out some time and communicate that blessing in at the least written word, but hopefully in a face-to-face encounter. Don't keep it bottled in, and don't wait to share that blessing that someone else gives you. Let that positivity spread and let it multiply so it becomes the antidote to that worry and gloom that so often can multiply like pests in an organic farm. And when there's next a tragedy in our world or our lives, we should pause and weep for the sadness. And then, as Mrs. Rogers said, we should look for the helpers. But I want us to do more than that. Don't just look for the helpers. Be the helper that Mrs. Rogers was pointing out. Be the one that others look toward for inspiration. And when you're next facing a challenge in your life and you find yourself dreaming or wishing or praying for a different reality, for a new path or for an alternate experience, as simple as it sounds, stop and see what is in your life. Take inventory of the blessings that you do have and that do exist, even amid your brokenness. See these things as gifts, as presents that won't solve your problems magically, but will help you realize that what you've been looking for is with you all the time. This Rosh Hashanah, as I put the talit over my head and I pray, I said the following prayer from Rabbi Chaim Stern, which was written in 1930 in the thick of the Great Depression, and I'll share it with all of you. Rabbi Stern said, "Days pass and the years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles. God, fill our eyes with seeing and our minds with knowing. Let there be moments when your presence, God, is like lightning, which illuminates the darkness in which we walk. Help us to see wherever we look, God, that the bush burns unconsumed, and we, mere clay touched by you, God, will reach out for holiness and exclaim in wonder, how filled with awe is this place, and we didn't even know it. May we all come to know the blessings in our life, the gifts that are abound, and God's presence that sit with us today and always. Shana Tova, everyone.